Good evening. My name's Karl. I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank Michael for asking me to be out here. I just have a lot of respect for Michael. He's one of these guys in Alcoholics Anonymous that I like to be like. He literally, you can be anywhere in Southern California or Nevada or Arizona, and you just find some place in AA and you stand there long enough, and Michael will be by. He'll sooner or later, he'll be there. Yeah. And I always enjoy being at meetings that are obviously very energetic and enthusiastic. I just love those. I just love that. I enjoyed listening to Kent. I really, really did. He did a great job. However, he lied to you. He said he had 8 DUIs, and one of them was on a bicycle. But actually, if you get it on a bicycle, it's not a DUI, it's a PUI. That's pedaling under the influence. That's what that is. If you're new and you think this sucks, we think that's great. We just think that's wonderful if you think this sucks. And also, if you're new and you've been sent here by the courts and you really think this sucks and you think this was just a total miscarriage of justice, I have a suggestion for you. I would suggest, let's see, what is it, Sunday night? No, courts are closed tomorrow. Tuesday morning. Well, before that, before you leave tonight, I want you to grab this particular pamphlet before you leave tonight, and then on Tuesday, go down to the courts, get your file pulled, go back in front of the judge and say, Judge, I'm not going to AA anymore. It's a miscarriage of justice. You were obviously wrong, and I'm not going anymore. Now, the pamphlet I recommend you grab from here tonight before you go do that is called AA in Prison. That's the pamphlet that I recommend you get. Anyway, the most important thing I can tell you about myself is that I'm an alcoholic. And the reason I believe I'm an alcoholic is because I have a really bizarre relationship with alcohol. First part of my bizarre relationship with alcohol happens when I drink it. Really weird thing happens when I drink alcohol, and that is the more alcohol I drink, the thirstier I get. And it happens with absolutely nothing else, only booze. Example of that, they were kind enough to give me this beautiful bottle of water. I mean, it's packaged real nice. It's like it makes you feel okay about spending $2 on a bottle of water when it looks like this. But they were kind enough to give me this bottle of water, and I'll probably drink half of it. Maybe I'll drink all of it over the next 40 minutes or so that I'm talking with you. But I can absolutely guarantee you that when I finish this bottle of water, I'm not going to go buy a case of water to get me through the rest of the night. I'm not going to do that. But with booze, it's just, I never know what's going to happen when I take a drink. Maybe, I'm just going to drink a couple of beers, smoke a joint, eat some Cap'n Crunch, and go to sleep. I don't know. Or I'm going to drink a couple of beers, and the next thing I know, it's 2 days later, and I'm naked in a motel room smoking crack. I have no idea which way it's going to go. But if that's the only thing that made me alcoholic was the fact that I lose control once I start to drink, if that's the only thing that made me alcoholic, well then Just Say No would have wiped out alcoholism, wouldn't it? When Nancy Reagan in the early 80s came out and said, just say no, I would have, and I imagine you would have gone, and just gone around saying no. Right? But I have this other thing. I have this mind that at all costs will rationalize and justify my way back to the next drink no matter what. And so I'm caught in the ultimate catch-22 of alcoholism, and I've had that ever since I first started drinking. I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. When I drink, I lose control. When I don't drink, I become so restless, irritable, and discontent, and I have a mind that rationalizes and justifies my way back to the next drink. And I'm caught in that ultimate catch-22. And I've had that relationship with alcohol ever since I first started drinking. I started drinking a lot later in life than a lot of people in AA. I was 11, and she heard me last night, and she's laughing before the punchline. She, It's Christina from Iceland. I was at one of those sort of sleepy meetings last night. They were all very nice people, but a little bit sleepy, not energetic like you guys. And I just love Icelanders. She was up there laughing away, and everybody's just sort of like, right? If you go to Iceland, I promise you, if you ever go to Iceland, hook up with the AAers. They are all so energetic, so enthusiastic, and I mean, just some of the best AA I've ever seen in my life. And it's on this little island of Iceland. It needs to be powerful in Iceland because, now I'm Icelandic, and I got to tell you, I have never been more proud of being an Icelander than when I woke up at like 5:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning when I was there, and I got up and I walked a number of blocks into downtown Reykjavik, and at 6 a.m. there were hundreds of people wandering the street drunk out of their minds. I mean, the women were in what used to be nice clothes. They're all ripped and torn, and their makeup's all over the place. There's guys in suits sleeping in the doorways, and I just stood there going, I am so proud. I'm not kidding you. I mean, that stuff just makes me proud. So they need good AA there. Anyway, I lived in Seattle as a kid, and a typical morning in 7th grade for me would be I'd show up early for school, not for study hall or anything, but to meet my new friends at the very edge of the school property, Loser's Corner. Every school's got a Loser's Corner, right, where everybody hangs out and smokes cigarettes and acts cool. And we would always have this jar, what I like to call the playground cocktail. That's a jar full of the parents' liquor cabinet mixture, right? It's scary in there because nobody's been to bartending school yet. So there's equal amounts of whiskey, vodka, cream de menthe, vermouth in that jar. There's green things floating around in that, and you can imagine about 5 or 6 of us 12-year-olds choking that down. And of course, it was the early 70s, so we're smoking that commercial pot. Anybody remember that stuff? 4-finger lids, $10 a bag, seeds and stems and the whole bit. And it was even before Ziploc bags came out. It would just be a regular Glad bag, and as you'd roll it up, there'd be about 9 people spit on it. You're like, oh, man. We'd pack all those seeds and stems and leaves into a homemade pipe, maybe made out of plumbing fittings and a screen. Or if we were really desperate that morning, it would be a toilet paper roll with aluminum foil and pinholes in it. Yeah, you guys were there, huh? We'd pack all those seeds and stems and leaves in there. We hit that lighter on it. The seeds and stems would be popping. We'd be burning holes in our clothes, and we'd like, are we going to school today? Now, it's at this point that many people in Alcoholics Anonymous that speak often interrupt themselves, and they say something like this. They say, I don't mean to offend anybody, but drugs are a part of my story. Now, I understand why they do that, but I really think it's a bizarre thing for alcoholics to apologize to other alcoholics for doing drugs while drinking or in between drunks. I understand apologizing to police officers and judges and all of that, but I don't know why we apologize to each other. In fact, the most bizarre example I've ever seen of that, I was in a speaker meeting a number of years ago, much like this one, and the speaker that night was just giving one of the most ugly, heinous, blow-by-blow drunkalogues I've ever heard. And I got to tell you, when I'm in a speaker meeting and the drunkalogue is getting ugly, the uglier it gets, more excited I get. And that night, I think I was on the edge of my chair, drooling, looking up at the speaker, going, yeah, go, 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 go! And at one point in this ugly story, the speaker said, I had 4 DUIs, and the judge said if I get one more DUI, I'm going to prison for sure. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I'm on the freeway. I hit a family of 4. They all wound up in the hospital. I wound up in prison. In prison, I sodomized men. I was sodomizing. I don't mean to offend anybody, but I did some drugs too. So by the time I'm 14, I'm the neighborhood drunk, I'm the neighborhood drug dealer. I forgot to mention, but my father was a neighborhood Lutheran minister is what he was. And my parents, very, very good, solid people in the community, and they saw me withering away in front of their eyes. I mean, prior to starting to get loaded at 11, I mean, I was like this kid. I was involved in music, involved in sports, I loved school, I loved my family. I mean, now I'm 14. It's like my parents are the enemy. I'm growing my hair down in front of my eyes, and my vocabulary is, whoa, wow, man. I call my mother man. Right? So they saw me withering away in front of their eyes, and they tried to help. But you see, they kept on blaming my problems on people, places, and things. They always thought if we can get them away from that damn group of kids he's hanging out with, things will get better. If we can get them out of that damn public school system, things will get better. They tried all of the above. But you see, I'm an alcoholic. My problems are not based upon people, places, and things. My problems are based upon my physical and mental relationship with alcohol. See, if you change the people, places, and things in somebody's life like mine, all that happens is that I'm loaded with different people in different places, ruining different things. That's all that happens. By the time I was like 17 or 18, I barely scraped out of the public school system there in Seattle, and my parents decided that Seattle was the problem. They thought if they could get me out of Seattle, things would get better, so they flipped the bill, they spent the money, and sent me 300 miles away to Washington State University. And I spent 3 years at that university on my parents' money, and in 3 years I got approximately 10 credits. That's what I got. At any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content, about a .25. By the time I was 22, this little story I'm about to tell you will let you know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, my father was Swedish, my mother is Icelandic, therefore I look like a polar bear, and I don't know whether this custom I'm about to tell you about is Scandinavian or whether it's Lutheran. I don't know. But at Christmas time, my parents would not just send out Christmas cards to their friends and relatives. They would send out this big, long Christmas letter that said everything the family had been doing that year. And when I was about 22, I got a hold of one of these letters that had been sent out the previous Christmas, and as I read it, it let me know exactly where I stood with my family. The first paragraph talked about what my parents had been doing that year, and the second paragraph talked about what the Morris children had been doing that year. And that paragraph went something like this. Our oldest daughter, Christina, just graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, with a master's degree in marketing. She's now working for a large pharmaceutical company in the Midwest. She traveled to Europe this summer. She saw this, she saw that. Her hobbies are this, this, and this. She's a very happy young woman. We're very proud of her. Our oldest son, Eric, just graduated from Western Washington State University with a degree in advertising. He's now working for a large advertising firm here in downtown Seattle. He loves to golf. He loves to travel. He's engaged to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou, who works for a very small company here in Seattle named Microsoft. That was a while ago, mind you. And they love to golf together. They love to travel together. He's a very happy young man. We're very proud of him. Our youngest son, Karl, just turned 22. Yeah. Long story short, a drug deal went very, very badly one night. I joined the Navy. It really is a long story. It's what I'm about to tell you should scare the daylights out of you, but on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test. It's called the ASVAB test, and this test qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should scare the daylights out of you that the Navy was even thinking maybe, possibly, or even remotely having any idea about putting somebody like me near anything nuclear. However, they made me take another test when I showed up at that base, and I could not pass that test. It's called a urinalysis test is what it's called. And I was immediately transferred from the nuclear engineering group to this group they affectionately called nuclear waste is what they called us. A year and a half later, I'm a lower rank than when I first came in. Didn't seem so abnormal to me at the time. It really didn't. It just sort of like, geez. I'm one of these guys in the Navy where there's faded areas where stripes used to be, right? Always, get a stripe, lose two, just always. This one morning, I'm driving my car into the base. It's a Monday morning. I got a bottle between my legs. I've been drinking all weekend. I'm just trying to nurse the last little bit of a binge going on, and there's a guard shack at the front of the Navy base where a Marine stands duty, and, you got to get past him to bring your car onto the base, and I don't know. They say I guess there was a depth perception problem going on. They say it was on my part. All I remember is I remember seeing the Marine sticking his head out of this guard shack. I could see his eyes. He's like, "Ugh!" And I looked down. I'm going like 35, 40 miles an hour. I tried to swerve. The car hit this median on the right-hand side and flipped up on its side and bam, right through that guard shack. I remember seeing that Marine doing this big dive out of there. And, you know, there's debris everywhere. I see the Marine getting up. He's all right. And, you know, my thought process right there, you know, I'm in the back seat of the car now. It's upside down. And, you know, it's just a big mess. And my thought process is not, oh, my God, what have I done? That's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, where's that bottle? Right? Now, I'm not thinking I need to find that bottle because I need to throw it into the bushes because that's evidence to incriminate me. I need to know where that bottle is because, based upon my experience at situations like this, I know that the authorities will be there in anywhere from 3 minutes to 15 minutes, depending on how busy they are. And based upon my experience in these types of situations, I know that when the authorities arrive on a scene like this, it's going to be a while till I get a drink. I know that. I know that. So, you know, I'm trying to find the bottle to get a few more hits in. That's just, I remember that's exactly what I was thinking. They had me in the hospital. They were just patching me up. I wasn't injured too badly, and they were reading new charges on me. This is nothing new in my life. But the most significant thing that happened that particular morning is the Navy doctors prescribed antabuse for me and sent this prescription back to the ship's doctor. Every morning before quarters, I would have to show up at sick bay, and the corpsman would put this little white pill on my tongue and make me sit there for a half an hour. Over the next 7 to 10 days, I started to experience the most cunning, baffling, and powerful side of this disease called alcoholism, and that is I had no alcohol or drugs in my system at all, and I was slowly going insane. I had developed a mental obsession and a spiritual malady so severe that no amount of discipline from the military, no amount of self-knowledge on my part, no amount of any psychological help that may have been available to me, no amount of love from anybody that may have still loved me that would have even taken an action to show that anymore, it's not going to conquer that, right? I remember counting the days on that antabuse, just it's been about 4 days, and I'm on antabuse. It's been about 6 days, and I'm on antabuse. Now it's been about 8 days, 6 hours, and 15 minutes, and I'm on antabuse. I started to look around that ship, and the other men, they're talking behind my back. All 300 of them. You ever felt that way in AA? The only difference is that in AA, we are talking behind your back. Only with love and tolerance in Paramount, I'm sure. On about the 10th day, I just snapped, and I went AWOL from the ship. I locked myself in a little hotel room in downtown San Diego, Plaza Hotel, wonderful place, $13 a night, you can imagine. And I got a bottle of vodka and a shot glass, and I set it on the end of this little rickety end table that was in the hotel room, and I still remember sitting on the edge of the bed looking at the bottle of vodka thinking, and I remembered that the Navy doctors had given me a warning about drinking on top of antabuse, and what they had said to me is, son, if you drink on top of antabuse, you're going to get one of two reactions. One reaction is you will get violently ill. The other reaction is you might die. I remember looking at the bottle of vodka thinking, well, I wonder which reaction I'm going to get. And I took one shot, and nothing happened. Authority had lied to me again as far as I was concerned. I waited about 2 minutes just to make sure. And I took another shot. All of a sudden, I felt tingly in the face, so I looked in this cracked little mirror that was in this hotel room, and I was bright red, blotchy and purple in places. Took another shot. All of a sudden, I could feel my heart going boom, boom, boom. Looked at my shirt. I was drenched in sweat, and then all of a sudden, I was like, hyperventilating. We're doing all right so far. This is a very sick group if you think that's funny. I have proof of that. I have proof of that. I'm going to skip ahead a couple of years. I'll come back to where I was. But 2 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm out of the Navy with an honorable discharge, direct result of the steps. But I had this sponsor and his sponsor that were just sticklers about the amends, much like Kent was talking about. Just really hounded me about the amends. And one of the amends that I had to make was my parents had paid for a bachelor's degree. Although they had said, when I told them I needed to make that, although they had said, just stay sober, my first sponsor said, unacceptable. You need to straighten that up. And I had two choices. I either had to pay them back for it, or I had to go get what they had paid for in the first place. So I used some VA benefits, and I went back to school when I was a couple of years sober. And in order to get some general ed credits out of the way, I took this speech class. And in the first couple of days of the speech class, the instructor was just sort of randomly pointing at students, throwing them up in front of the room, giving them a topic, and they were supposed to talk for a couple of minutes, right? After about 5 or 6 students were thrown up there, he pointed at me. I went up to the front of the room. From the back of the room, the instructor shouted out, "Talk about a bizarre situation in your life." So I told him about drinking on top of van abuse. They didn't react the way you guys just reacted. They were like, took me months to get any friends in that class after that. So I'm back in the hotel room, I'm red-faced, hyperventilating and sweating, and take another shot. And up it came. My late sponsor, Eddie Cochran, calls this next thing that happened to me projectile regurgitation. Just straight up and out, no warning. Thank God I was in the type of hotel room with the toilets in the same room as the bed. Right? But I found the magic of drinking on top of van abuse, that if I would hang in there, and if I kept drinking and kept puking and kept drinking and kept puking for about an hour to an hour and a half, enough of the abuse would kick out of my system, and I would quit throwing up, and I would just be left with red face, hyperventilating, and sweating, and I already told you, I'm all right with that. All right? So, if there is somebody who is new or fairly new, and you are on abuse, you can drink on it, but you got to get two things going on at the same time. First thing you got to get going on is you've got to hang in there, okay? You got to hang in there, and at the very same time, you've got to not die. If you can get those two things going on at the same time, have at it, have at it. I drank on top of antabuse for the last 7 months of my drinking. It got nasty. It was just desperation drinking. That's the only thing I can call it. I mean, it was just really, really ugly. Second to my last drunk, they had to do reconstructive surgery on my face. My last drunk, I fell out of my car, and when the police pulled me over, and I remember the officer as I was climbing up out of this ditch that I'd fallen into as I opened up the door, he said, "Oh my God, should we get an ambulance?" And I go, "What?" He goes, "You look like you're going to explode." And I go, "Oh, that's just the abuse. Don't worry about it." Right? Well, the handcuffs went on anyway, and, funny, he didn't laugh either. He didn't find anything funny about that. So anyway, when I was being brought back to the ship on my last drunk, the officer of the deck put his arm up and he said, "No. Orders were processed on this loser last night. Orders are 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, or treatment." Now, it's not like I stood there and I thought, I think getting sober right now would be a good idea. Didn't think that, nor did I even think, you know what? I can beat this rap if I act like I want to get sober. It wouldn't have mattered what I thought anyway, because I was in handcuffs. I don't know about you, but whenever I was in handcuffs, they never turned to me and said, "So what's your opinion?" Right? I'm going where they say. And I was taken to this treatment center up at Miramar, and the doors were locked behind me, and the handcuffs were then taken off. And everybody that showed up that week, they came from various bases and commands and ships, and there was 35 of us that were going to do this 45-day thing together that were in our group, and none of us for the first couple of days are looking at each other. We're just staring at the floor, and this facilitator trying to get us to talk. None of us want to talk. But there's one guy, he raised his hand. His name was Paco. He was from some other base somewhere. He raised his hand at this group session. He goes, "I hear I'm supposed to be rigorously honest with you guys if I'm going to do this staying sober thing, so I want to be rigorously honest. My real name's not Paco. Paco's just a street name I've had ever since I've been 15 years old, and you know what? My real name's Randy. Will you guys call me Randy from now on? The rest of us kind of looked up from the floor just enough time to say, yeah, whatever. Nice to meet you, Randy. But this facilitator got really excited, said, oh, my God, there's the first breakthrough of any honesty of any of you SOBs. Later that afternoon, Randy was paraded in front of us. They slapped a golden name tag on him that said Randy. And then we were all informed that whenever staff was not around, Randy's in charge. Right? Oh, we loved him. We just loved him. On about the 7th day, they took us all to our first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. At least it was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had never been to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no prior opinion as to what Alcoholics Anonymous was or was not. Just never really had the conversation with anybody. I knew there was such a thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. It's hard to be a drunk out there or even be alive out there for the last 20 years and not know there's such a thing called AA. I know that 40 or 50 years ago, you could maybe not have heard of it, but, you know, in my lifetime, I'd heard of it. And, you know, they took us to this meeting, sit in the back, and they did this reading. And then a bunch of people got up to share. And I'm not one of these people that said, you know, I did, for whatever reason, the way I felt in those group sessions where I was just looking down at the floor and not even really listening or anything, for some reason, you broke through that in 5 minutes. I'm not one of these guys that said, I don't belong here, you know, rejected it and shut my mind down. You guys hooked me in just a couple of minutes because I had never heard anybody talk about the stuff you're talking about. Not the drinking stories. Heard the drinking stories, lived the drinking stories. But I had never heard anybody talk about the soul sickness when we have no alcohol or drugs in our system. I had never heard anybody describe that alcoholic mind and that soul sickness when we have no booze in our system, that restlessness, irritability, and discontentment. You know, for years, I would have wanted to say to authority figures when they'd be yelling at me about my drinking, I would have wanted to say this if I would have known anything. I would have wanted to say, yeah, I know. I know it looks bad. Yes, I know. Yes, I see that burning car over there. I know it looks bad. But if you knew how I felt when I wasn't drinking, you wouldn't be asking me why I drink. Right? And you guys were talking about that. I'll never forget this one guy. I don't remember any specifics about that meeting, but I do remember this one guy getting called on. He walked all the way to the front. He introduced himself. He said one sentence, and he sat down. And he just knocked me right out of my chair with that sentence. He got up and said, my name's Jack. I'm an alcoholic. My mind would have killed my body a long time ago, except it needed it for transportation. And he sat down. I'm just like, wow. Next night, we went to another meeting. I got very confused at that meeting because everybody at that meeting was talking about something called a drug of choice. People were up there saying, my drug of choice is. And somebody else said, well, my drug of choice is. And the more they said that, the more confused I got. I'm sitting in the back thinking, oh, my God, was I supposed to be choosing out there? Jesus. Do they want me to choose now? What? So I'm back at the treatment center. I asked the counselor who'd been assigned to us, I go, Mary, last night in that AA meeting, they were talking about something called a drug of choice. What do they mean by that? And she said, Karl, let's play a little game. Now, I'm 8 days into this thing, and they still got me on anticonvulsant medications. If you've ever been on those, you know what I'm talking about. You can look straight ahead and things are fine, right about to here. But over here, little things are dancing over here, and you look over there, and now they're over here. And so you right? So if you ever see any newcomers that still have the hospital bracelets on, right? And they're going, now you know what's up, right? So I'm real shifty here. And Mary says, let's play a game. And I go, okay. And she says, imagine this. Imagine I came into this room, Karl, and I had a tray. And on that tray, I got a bottle of Jack Daniels, an ounce of cocaine, and an ounce of Thai sticks. Which one would you take? I started to drool immediately. Just, I take them all. She snapped her face. Settle down. She says, no, you can't have them all. You can only have one. Which one would you take? And I said, well, I guess I'd take the ounce of cocaine. She said, well, then maybe cocaine is your drug of choice. Do you understand now? I said, no. She said, what's the problem? I said, well, Mary, the only reason I take the ounce of cocaine is, well, I'd take that ounce of cocaine and I'd get the hell out of here and I'd sell 2 8-balls. Now I'd have enough money to buy a quarter pound of Thai sticks and a case of Jack Daniels. That's what I would do. So, Now, the only reason I bring that up is to talk about a very important aspect of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's sobriety days. Right? No matter what you may think your drug of choice is at this point, there's only one sobriety day. Right? I sure hope if you're one of the people that are struggling, am I an addict, am I alcoholic, and in that never-ending argument with yourself, I hope you stay here long enough to find out what alcoholism is before you dismiss it. Right? That's the first thing I ask. But, no matter what, there's still only one sobriety day. If you work with lots of new people, look, I know lots of people here do work with lots of new people. I'm sure you run across this scenario just like I do. If I see some new guy around my home group that I've seen around for a little while, I'll go up to him, try to be friendly, say, hey, good to see you. How long do you got now? Every once in a while I get this response. Well, my drinking sobriety date is January 4th. My pot clean date is May 3rd. Oh, I blew my methamphetamine date last night. I was in Walmart all night long. One sobriety date. Makes it easier. Funniest thing I ever heard about sobriety date, same scenario. Saw this guy around my home group that I'd seen for a while, went up to him and said, hey, good to see you. How long do you got? He said, well, I had 90 days, but I drank last night, so now I got 89 days. I actually had to think about that one for a minute. I was like... That actually falls in the same category, I think, as being down in Mexico, looking at the tequila going, would that affect my U.S. sobriety date? Yes. Yes. Yes, it will. Anyway, after 45 days, they're going to let us all out of that treatment center, just what the orders were. And on the Wednesday before the Friday that they let us out, they gathered all 35 of us. They put us in this room, and they got the biggest, meanest counselor to come in. He was a Marine, and he came in his full dress uniform. Very impressive, very intimidating sight when they're in their full dress uniform. And he just panned the room, stared at every one of us. He didn't say a word for like what seemed like an hour. It's probably 2 minutes, and we're all just like, and after what seemed like forever, he finally spoke. He said, you 35 have been through one of the finest treatment centers in the world for alcoholism and drug addiction. We've been here for many, many years. And our statistics over the years have shown us that out of you 35, only one of you will stay continuously sober from this day forward. Many of you will die, go insane, wind up in prison. It's a nice little exit pep talk they're giving, isn't it? Many of you will relapse once, twice, maybe 20 times, and then make it back into long-term sobriety. But according to our statistics, only one of you will stay continuously sober from this day forward. And if you thought it was silent before he said that, now you could hear a pin drop in there. The only thing you could hear was me going, shit. Because I knew if only one of us was going to make it, I knew it wasn't going to be me. We all knew who it was going to be. It's going to be Randy over here, guaranteed, like the poster boy of the treatment center. So on this Friday afternoon, they're letting us all out, and there's about 4 or 5 of us that were out waiting on the front doorsteps for our cars to be brought out of impound. We'd been arrested in vehicles the night before we were thrown in there, and when they brought out my vehicle, I was so successful when I was out there getting loaded that they brought out my Rolls Canardly. That's the kind of car that rolls down one hill and can hardly make it up the next, is what that is. 68 Volkswagen, hole in the floorboard, got to push start the thing, right? Anyway, there's 4 of us standing there, sea bags at our feet, and one of the guys points to the other edge of the parking lot. There's a car slowly coming towards us. We go. One of the guys says, hey, is that Randy in that car? We look. Yeah, sure enough, that's Randy. Kept coming at us. A little closer. One of the guys says, he's drinking already. Sure enough, he's got himself a pint. He's just polishing it off. He rolls down the window, goes right in front of us, throws it right at our feet. Crash! We look up. He gives us all the finger, and he drives right off. Guess his name was Paco again. I don't know. Next thing that I remember of that day is I showed up at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, North Shore Orlando Club, Pacific Beach, Gong Show meeting is what it's called. And I'm sitting in the back of this meeting, and truth about my life is I'm 45 days without a drink or a drug. Got a lot of information, and I'm in the best physical condition I've been in since I've been a young teenager. Like a time bomb waiting to go off. There'd been no spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, or even a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. Treatment was a great start. But you know what? It hadn't happened. The necessary change at the level of my soul, it certainly was nowhere near in sight at that moment. If there was ever a turning point in my life, it was right there that night, sitting at that meeting. One guy that night, I'm sure there was lots of other guys there that night, but this one guy who was operating on his primary purpose that night leaned over to me and said, "Hey, never seen you here before. What are you doing?" I didn't think quick enough to lie to him, because I promise you, I would have lied to him if I just would have thought for one more second. And I said, "I don't know. Just got out of this Navy treatment center a few hours ago. Got me. I don't know what I'm doing." This guy's eyes went bing, big smile went across his face, and he's like, all of a sudden at the break, he's fighting his friends off. "He's mine, he's mine, I got him, I got him." I didn't know there were guys in AA that get all excited when some new guy says that he doesn't know what he was doing. But there was something else going on in this guy's life that particular night that made him especially glad to meet me. This guy's girlfriend of a couple of years had left him the night before for one of his friends in his home group. Yeah, so he's wondering what to do with his weekend: homicide, suicide, get loaded, or grab this newcomer. He's like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. This guy was insane over this woman all weekend. Just insane. I mean, at one point, one of his friends trying to calm him down got him up to read chapter 5. And he got up there and he said, "Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover, people who cannot, who will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually women who are constitutionally incapable." His friends go, his friends are like ready to throw him back into the seat. In between the meetings, he'd throw me in the passenger side of his car and he'd start driving, he'd start yelling. He wouldn't even look at the road. He had like one of those AA radar cars that just made it to the next meeting, right? And he'd be yelling at me. He would yell, "You got to go to meetings. You got to read the book. You got to get a sponsor. God damn her. Got to go to meetings. Got to read the book. Damn her." I'm like, now I didn't know it, but I was getting a very early introduction to your typical AA relationship breakup is what I was getting. But I'm so very glad that this guy that night was a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous who had done the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, had taken the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and understood that the solution to his pain was out of self. Out of self, out of self. I am so glad that he was out dragging my sorry butt around instead of being at home underneath his covers, whining into his sponsor's answer machine. She left, call me back, damn it, right? Instead, he's dragging my sorry butt around because he understood that that was the solution to his pain, right? And by going to so many meetings in the same area of town, I learned something really valuable about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I learned that weekend, I'm going to correlate it to a football game. Now, a football team is out there on the field for one reason and one reason only, to win the game, right? And how do they win that game? They will huddle up, they'll make a plan, and they will do one play. Then they will huddle up again, make a new plan, and do one play. Well, that's exactly what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the game around here is one day without a drink or a drug, big winner. And how do we do that one day? We run in here and we huddle up. And we go, "Remember, we're bodily, mentally different from our fellows. Break!" And we go out there and we try a little of this, try a little of that, and we run right back in here and we huddle up. We go, "Remember, we're bodily, mentally different from our fellows." And just before we break, some guy in the corner will get up and say, "Hey, wait, hang on. I've been here for 6 months. I'm sober, but I'm broke and I'm bored. What do I do?" Somebody like Bud will get up and say, "Son, get a job. Break." We go out there and we try a little of this, try a little of that. And it's really important that I understand what it means to be bodily and mentally different from my fellows. I've got to understand allergy to the body, obsession of the mind, right? I've got to understand that. So please, as Kent was saying over and over again, please get into that book. Please find somebody. I know there's a lot. Go to that workshop on the 31st. Bob D. will light up that book for you if you come here with the right attitude. I promise you. I've heard it numerous times, right? If you don't know, please hook up and utilize Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the things that I learned after my first sponsor was another guy on the ship. He took me through the steps, tricked me into working the steps. Middle of the Pacific Ocean. And this is how he tricked me into working the steps. He didn't say we're now going to sit down and work the steps. He just said we're going to read the book. Middle of the Pacific Ocean, 6:30 every night, 21 days straight. He would read, I would read. He would read, I would read. And then when the book actually said to do something, he would close the book. And we did it, right? And he tricked me. Because I would have been one of those that sort of balked and said, "I'm still working on this. I'm thinking about step 2. I'm going to linger on step 3 for a while, and 6 and 7, I'll spend 6 or 7 months on, right? I'm one of those guys that would have done every dance around it had you allowed me to. One of the biggest things that happened when I took the steps is that I learned the responsibility that I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. When I started to get that change at the level of my soul, right? Where I got that healing at the level of my soul, where all of a sudden I was no longer looking over my shoulder at stoplights, where I could actually move off the back wall of an AA meeting. And now there was nobody in San Diego that was really looking for me. They were all in Seattle, right? But I still had that feeling that I needed to be against the wall where I could pan the whole room, right? And it was funny. I didn't even know how soul sick I was until I started to come out of it. It's a funny thing about soul sickness. You've got to come out of it to realize how sick you were. It's a strange, strange thing. And the responsibility I learned about only one alcoholic can really help another alcoholic at that level, right? To affect that change. It's got to seem to come from another alcoholic. And I have a responsibility to be here. How I learned that, I'm going to tell you this little story, then I'm out of time. My first sponsor, Bob, and I, the guy on the ship, we would often split a hotel room whenever the ship pulled into a foreign port. We would find meetings. We'd split a hotel room just to get off the ship because, they stacked a 60 in a berthing and stuff, so we'd try to get off the hotel and get a hotel room, go to the meetings. We were in Victoria, British Columbia. We got a hotel room, and we went off to the meetings. Bob, after the meeting, said he was really tired. He went back to the hotel room. I stayed out with the AAers for a while. An hour or two later, maybe 2, I come back to the hotel room, and there's Bob. He's still awake, lights are on, and he's got this guy from our ship named Blair. Now, Blair is just hammered. He's in a blackout, he's drooling, and Bob has him propped up against the headboard, right, with an end table and pillows, and Bob is reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to him. Now, I look at this scenario, and I think, Bob is obviously desperate to stay sober tonight. Why didn't he just stay out with us, Why is he chasing this guy down? And he didn't. Blair came knocking on the door asking for help and then fell face first, and that's when Bob propped him up and decided to read the big book. But I still thought it was silly that, Blair's too drunk, he's not going to remember anything, so I went over to my side of the room, I turned out my light, rolled over, went to sleep. 3 weeks later, we're back in San Diego, in port, and there's on the side of my rack is Karl, wake up, and it's Bob. He goes, Blair's on the Coronado Bridge, we're going to get him. Well, apparently Blair for the last couple of weeks had been drinking, trying not to drink, drinking, trying not to drink. Guess he was at the jumping off point, I guess. And he's up there on the Coronado Bridge. Now, I don't know if you know about the Coronado Bridge, but it's a really popular suicide spot. In fact, it's so popular that they have a suicide hotline phone at the top. Just in case you get a little change in heart, I guess. So, apparently Blair had picked up the suicide hotline phone, and this is what he was saying to the counselor on the other end. I will only talk to Bob W. Counselor's going, who's Bob W? He goes, it's anonymous. Well, they kept at him and they dragged out of him that he was from the Navy and what ship he was from. So they called down to the quarterdeck of our ship at 3 a.m. in the morning, and because my first sponsor, Bob W., he did not guard his own anonymity at the level of that ship, so he could be of service at any time. The guy on duty at 3 a.m., when they said, is there a Bob W. on that ship? They go, oh, yeah, Mr. 12 Steps, we know who he is. They go and get him. He comes to get me. Karl, wake up, we're going to get Blair. All right, so I get up, and we get into Bob's car, and we start driving down to the Coronado Bridge, and Bob says, grab the big book out of the glove box. We're going to bone up on working with others. And it's, all right. It says, see your man alone if possible, Bob. He's alone up there, isn't he? He sure is. He goes, oh, forget it. We'll wing it. We get down there. We get down to the base of the Coronado Bridge, and everything that San Diego County has available for a situation like this is there. Fire department's there. Paramedics are there. On-duty psychologist is there. And they're all like, right? They don't know what to do next. Bob and I walk up on this scene. One of the firemen looks and says, is one of you Bob W? Bob goes, yeah, that's me. He goes, I don't know what you're going to do. We've been trying for an hour and a half. He ain't budging, but here, hands him this little microphone. Bob gets the microphone and goes, Blair? You can hear the voice come through. Bob, is that you? Bob says, yes, Blair, it's me. Now get the hell down from that bridge. And you hear, okay. You see, one alcoholic can affect another alcoholic like no one else can. Please don't forget that. Be here in your seat and be available to the new person. God bless.